There we go. We're back live and calling the meeting back to order. And we have Rights and Democracy of Vermont with us for a few minutes. And welcome to the Senate Ag Committee. And you're Anna?
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll introduce ourselves and get started.
Brian Collmore representing the Rutland District.
Irene Renner, Chittenden North, West Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County, Wilmington, Londonderry.
I'm Rich Westman from Illinois.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Orleans County. So welcome, and I think, did we have you in last year or the year before?
No. I mean, you had Rights and Democracy, you know, with the lobby day, but I am new.
Yeah, well, welcome, and you're going to be presenting.
Yes, I'll be kicking this off.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, members of the Senate Agriculture Committee, for welcoming Rights and Democracy today. My name is Anna Mejia. I am the organizing director for Rights and Democracy in Vermont. And before I begin, I want to share a land acknowledgement with the committee. Rights and Democracy acknowledges the Mohican and Southern Vermont and Abenaki peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Indakana, which includes parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, New England, and Quebec. As guests on the unceded territory of the Mohican and Abenaki peoples, we honor their ancestors, elders, and relations past, present, and emerging. We also acknowledge that our nation has benefited from the uncompensated and exploited labor represented in the legacy of slavery and the present-day reality of migrant farm workers. Thank you. Rights and Democracy, which we call RAD for short, and our sibling organization, Rights and Democracy Institute, were founded in 2015 on the theory of change that it takes people power year after year to make the kind of big, bold, long-term changes we want to see in our society. Our members are from all walks of life, intergenerational, multicultural, activist organizers, and everyday people, but most importantly, passionate fighters for true social justice and meaningful change in our communities and across the state. Our current systems are rooted in historic oppressions, deeply dysfunctional and fragile. When those fragile systems break, Vermonters who have been systemically kept out of places of power are those most impacted. Abenaki and Indigenous people, the global majority, LGBTQIA individuals, individuals with disabilities, seniors, New Americans, youth, and those living in poverty are the ones who carry the weight of policies and systems gone wrong. These individuals are nearly 80% of the Vermont voting population and are the least represented in our state government, and are in some cases wholly invisible to those who enact the policies. Our mission is to bring people together to take action to build healthy communities and make the values of our communities guide the policies of our government. We believe we can achieve a society where people earn a livable wage and have access to affordable health care, and where a progressive and equitable tax system supports an economy that protects the environment and human rights. It is our pleasure to testify to you today and share our 2023 policy platform that encapsulates our visions for a more just and vibrant Vermont. Vermont must do its part to ensure a just transition to a clean energy future that mandates renewable energy and ends our reliance on dirty, polluting fossil fuels. And we must guarantee that everyone benefits, especially Vermonters who have been most impacted by past and current harms. That's why this year we want to see the state pass an Affordable Heat Act that actually meets the needs and demands of communities at the front lines of climate change. We want an Affordable Heat Act that prioritizes the health of frontline communities by eliminating biofuels as a clean heat alternative, that supports geothermal and other thermal network energy as an alternative to fossil fuels, that includes renters and current energy assistance beneficiaries in the Clean Heat Equity Advisory Group, and that delivers a more equitable proportion of the benefits of this act to low-income Vermonters, including renters. There's been some progress on this Affordable Heat Act policy, but we must go even further by making the changes listed to meet the call for a just transition and pass a bill that frontline communities can all get behind. We are also supporting efforts to reform the renewable energy standard and ensure that Vermont can get at least 30% in-state renewable energy and 30% regional renewable energy in the next decade. In-state renewable energy is the key to our state resiliency, helps build the green economy that Vermont communities need, and doesn't shift the climate burden of our energy use to other states. We are also supporting H56, the Ratepayer Protection and Thermal Energy Network Act. This bill would extend electric ratepayer protections to more Vermonters as a proven solution to Vermont's energy choices by creating a pathway for geothermal and moves Vermont away from combusting fuels by prohibiting gas expansion into new service territories. On the housing front, we know Vermont is in a housing crisis. That means there isn't enough affordable housing for Vermonters, and many Vermonters are forced to live in expensive, unsafe places. And tenants who bring concerns about their living conditions to the landlord also have to worry about eviction and homelessness. We need housing for all. That is why we need to work both on creating new affordable housing like provisions in the Senate Housing Omnibus Bill, and we also need to protect tenants' rights. The Housing Omnibus Bill includes many needed zoning, Act 250, and housing discrimination changes that we support and hope that the bill will pass the House and Senate. To meet the needs of tenants in Vermont, we must also pass statewide just cause eviction protection, eviction diversion programs, and cap the amount of rent increases to tenants that tenants will have to bear. Lastly, the legislature passed Burlington City charter change for just cause eviction, but the governor vetoed that bill. We need to build off of the 99 votes the House got in the veto override and pass that bill this year. We also need to ensure that Vermont has all the data it needs to accurately track our rental market, including where the units are, who owns them, the accessibility of the unit, and other pertinent information. Without this basic information, we will always be behind on understanding the true rental prices, and it limits our ability to take action for Vermont renters. With respect to our food system, we must create equitable access to land, farming, and food. We were glad to see the passage of universal school meals in 2022, but it's time to find a permanent funding solution to ensure that all Vermont's children get the healthy meals they need without stigma. The Land Access and Opportunity Board is an equity board created by the legislature in the last biennium and is housed at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. In the coming weeks, this board will release a report of recommendations that the legislature should consider and take action on. But what we do know now is that the board will need continued funding to do its work. This means a fiscal year 2024 budget adjustment to $1 million. This will allow the board to formalize its procedures and set itself up in the long term for work that is needed in creating greater access and opportunity for those Vermonters who have been historically left out. Workers in Vermont's retail, restaurant, agriculture, and other service industries play deeply vital roles in our communities. Yet these workers are often underpaid and underprotected in their workplaces. To thrive, all workers need fair and dignified wages, full benefits, and strong legal protections. The subminimum wage, a direct legacy of slavery, particularly impacts women and disproportionately women of color. It is time to end the subminimum wage and pass one fair wage for all Vermonters. We also need to pass the Vermont PRO Act that strengthens workers' rights. When it comes to public education, we have a long way to go to make all Vermont schools equitable and welcoming for all students. We need to remove police from schools, make anti-discrimination policies more accessible, and develop an education funding system that is as equitable as possible by implementing the recommendations of the Income-Based Education Tax Study Committee. Vermont is known as a leader for voting rights and democracy, and we need to continue that leadership by implementing a system of ranked choice voting for the presidential primaries and then for all elections. Ranked choice voting gives more access to more candidates and gives voters real choice at the ballot box. We must also create a state legislature that everyone can take part in. This means greatly increasing the salary and benefits for our state legislators and also the per diems for those appointed to state boards and committees. The last crisis I will speak to certainly isn't the least: Vermont's overdose crisis. Vermont has become a leader in the deadliness of the overdose crisis. The legislature last year passed many important provisions that were undone with the governor's veto. This year, we must pass permanent buprenorphine decriminalization for personal use, create overdose prevention sites, make accessible community-based syringe services for all Vermonters, create a mobile methadone clinic pilot program, and expand treatment education for first responders. This means supporting H72 and H222. It is important that we lift the voices of the people, and today RAD will be joined by many of our amazing leaders, over 24 today, in giving testimony in several committees. We thank you for allowing RAD to speak to you today and hope that you will listen to the voices and messages of the people that you will hear from. Joining me today in this committee are Rights and Democracy supporters and allies. Today we have Jess Laporte and Mindy Blank. Jess is a member of the Land Access and Opportunity Board and co-director of Community Resilience Organizations, along with Mindy Blank, Both are also activists on climate and racial justice. And I will hand it over to Jess.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Anna.
Anna. Does whoever's speaking sits in the chair?
Yes.
I will go first. Hi all, my name is Jess Laporte. I identify with she, her pronouns. And I grew up in Lamoille County in Vermont. And I guess I never really thought I saw myself being involved in advocacy. But I've been deeply engaged in BIPOC affinity spaces across the state, land access work, and also involved in police reform work in the state. And every time that I come to testify on behalf of something, I'm constantly asking, like, why am I here? Both in the sense of, why would you all want to listen to me? And also, why am I here to represent this work? And so I just want to acknowledge the privileges that give me the capacity to be here, that aren't shared by all of the folks that I'm truly engaged in this work with. And I know Anna would echo the same for RAD, right? We send representatives, the people who have the time, the capacity, and the resources, but also who might be maybe a little bit more received when we think about the way that our policies and even our government functions. Just showing up here today was a little bit of work. But I want to speak on behalf of the Land Access and Opportunity Board. I'm curious if you all are familiar with the board that was created in the last biennium.
I'm not really.
Great, I'll start there then.
Little
Well,
bookie help.
And
Thank
I think that is actually really indicative of this process, right? Is there's so much happening in the State House, there's a lot created. And this is an example of a board that has the opportunity to collaborate with many, many departments and different branches of the legislature to move forward agendas around equity. And I think it's something that many of our departments who are actually named in the section of Act 122 that created the board, many of those departments, the Vermont Housing, Affordable Housing, and even the Working Lands and all of these different things, they have these equity goals. And everyone is kind of working across different parts of the government and the state to move forward these equity agendas. And the Land Access and Opportunity Board is an opportunity for the legislature to consolidate those. So I just want to read the intent statement, and I would really encourage you to refer to it and to think for your committee, how would this board partner with either somebody who's presenting something else related to equitable land access to you all, and you're trying to maybe work on a bill. The Land Access and Opportunity Board is an instrumentality of the state that will be available to set up programs and also to support programs that are trying to improve their equity work. So the intent of creating this body is to acknowledge structural racism and address prevalent wealth disparities by creating new opportunities to improve access to woodlands, farmland, and land and home ownership for Vermonters from historically and continually marginalized communities who continue to face barriers to land and home ownership. This was originally introduced as the BIPOC Land Access and Opportunity Board Bill, H273 in the last biennium. But this board really treats all protected classes. We have representation from the Department of Developmental Disabilities and from social work, the National Social Workers Alliance. We are trying to work across all of these communities because some of our barriers to access are the same and some are very different. So I tend to talk very long. So where am I? Are we doing okay on time? Need to move quickly? Okay. So in terms of moving forward with the board, we have 11 representatives on the board from a number of community-based organizations. And I would like for you all to maybe consider this board similarly to the Health Equity Board that was created in the last biennium, in the first year of the last biennium, and the Environmental Justice Committee that was also created in the last biennium. All of these boards can work with your departments to implement some of the strategies that you're looking for, and with the right resources, and that's where the appropriations comes in, with the right resources can also be a partner in the truth and reconciliation process. When things are surfaced through truth and reconciliation, one of the boards that, or one of the bodies that could take action on housing and land related equity issues would be the Land Access and Opportunity Board. So our focus for this next year and the nearly $1 million appropriation that we're asking for is about capacity building for the board to be able to engage these community members in meaningful ways in this work on the state level. And we would really like to have the appropriation to engage in some assessment ourselves, while also recognizing that there's going to be deep work done by the Truth and Reconciliation process. So we don't need to replicate that, but we want to dig in specifically around housing. And we think that community engagement is incredibly important for that. Are there any questions?
Well, I'm wondering who are these boards, who sets them up?
So this board was created in Act 122. 122. Sorry, I'm like really bad with all the numbers. I was like 121. Act 122, Section 22. And it is housed it's under the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. So it's not an independent organization. There is potential for independence in the future, but we also recognize the need for efficiency. There's especially given the reporting that's needed to be an instrumentality of the state. If we can continue to exist and work within an existing instrumentality, that could be advantageous. Yeah. And in a similar way, when I was mentioning like there's an important part of the statute that is about advisory powers over these other housing and land access initiatives that the state is doing. And the hope would be that there would be transparent and open communication and the opportunity for this board to provide advice, recommendations, but also to potentially consolidate some of these programs. Because, there's a lot of replication. And I think the take home though has to be that there continue to be people who are left behind, even in our existing programs, even in existing housing affordability programs and existing, land ownership or our existing farmlands and working lands provisions leave behind a lot of folks. And the goal of the Land Access and Opportunity Board is to fill some of those gaps by strengthening the existing programs and likely standing up new programs as well.
Yeah. Other questions?
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, well,
There's a little bit of time and a couple brief points.
yeah, we got
Yeah.
a minute or two.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'll get out of the hot
Really
seat.
quick.
I'm gonna sit here.
Yeah,
Hi, everyone. I'm Mindy Blank. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I have been living in Vermont for my entire adult life. So I am a Vermonter by choice, and this is my chosen home. I am a lifelong climate justice activist. I have worked on state, national, and international policy, and I haven't been so hopeful and enthused about a piece of legislation or a piece of policy since the Paris Treaty of 2016. I have been working with the Seeding Power Coalition, that is the group behind the Land Access and Opportunity Board that's been working for the past several years to draft legislation. We're a citizen group. We are a community group of people who came together because this is important. And so we're a group of community activists. We've been working for 3 years, and there are just a few points that I want to make about the Land Access and Opportunity Board. As Jess poignantly talked about and shared about this board, it's in Act 182. So many things to remember.
No, we have, I know.
I know. So,
No problem.
182. It's on page 39,
Yep.
so easy for you to find. You can read more about it. And this board has jurisdiction to advise many different agencies working on housing, agriculture, finance, taxes. It has jurisdiction across the board to advise in many different agencies. And so it's really important to look into. And this board is a mechanism that is constitutional, that is tackling really tricky things in a really tangible way. And And it's building reparative programs for marginalized populations in Vermont by those populations, and so it's people who are intimately involved in working with these communities and who are setting out really clear ways to actually improve access to land and housing. And this board has garnered so much support from constituents in every single county, in every single region across the entire state and beyond Vermont too. And it's similar to the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative in terms of organizational support that's behind this board. There's a lot of organizational support, there's philanthropic support. And I am confident that if the state continues to appropriate funding for the board, which is what we're here to advocate for, is the continued existence of this board. If that happens, I have absolutely no doubt that private funding will also come to this board. And so this is a really important mechanism, and this is something that people have been scratching their heads about for years. How do we do this? This board. And so the Sunrise report that is coming out from the board this week, it has a budget, and that should be looked at as a baseline budget for operations of this board to continue. And hopefully the way that appropriations will look will be funding for multiple years for this board. So it's not just 1 year of funding for this board to continue, but actually multiple years. And so I just want to put that out there so that you have a sense of what an appropriations ask might be, and that the board may come back next year or the following year to ask for appropriations for the programs. But what it's setting out is the actual baseline budget for this board to continue existing and for it to blossom. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Reach
Thank
out
you.
with any questions.
Yeah, and later, Rich, do you recall when our appropriations hearing is on for advocacy?
I don't remember when that is, but
You want to keep an eye out on the legislative website for the Appropriations Committee's day of public advocacy groups coming in.
Yeah.
And try to make it
Yeah,
to that.
definitely. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're also working with Action Circles, and they have been planting many of these seeds and planting these things in our ears.
So I had a question, I think, for Anna. You mentioned one of the Senate bills, number 5, which some people refer to as the Affordable Heat Act. And I don't want to mischaracterize what I think I heard, but you oppose it in its current form, is that correct?
So in its current form, I would like to see, in order to be like frontline communities would all be able to get on board and say we want this to be passed, which I think is what people are saying. It's not like we want to strike this down. It's let's change some of the languages. So there's specific things that I want to say that we are proposing, not the whole bill in general, because there is some language in there that I do think is really critical. So the pieces that I'm opposed to is the continue and identifying as biofuels as the transition fuel. We don't think that that's a good solution. Some of the language in there too about the makeup of who's going to be on that clean heat advisory board. We don't feel like those frontline communities are named there. And the other piece, the percentages or the proportion of how much the clean heat credits are going to go towards low income Vermonters. I mean, it's not even half. If we're saying that this is supposed to be affordable, why is it a small, tiny percentage? And it's not even saying it symbolically, it's not even half.
Have you testified before the Senate Natural Resources?
Not myself, but we have had advocates testify. We've had people from RAD, from 350, people
Okay.
from our even Judy Dow. So
Okay.
there has been tons of testimony.
Thanks.
that goes
That's good
with.
to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we
Very helpful.
hate to crowd you, but we got another crew waiting.
That was very helpful.
But
Yeah.
thank you all very much.
Yeah.
for-
I'm assuming you have our contact information and,
Yeah, it's very.
and also you can get a hold of the Land Access Opportunity Board has a website, a landing page on VHCB's website.
Yeah.
And you can get in touch with us there. I would, chairing the board.
Yeah.
We rotate facilitation, but it was convened by VHCB and Susanna Davis's office. The thing that I think is really critical for appropriations is that we all create the precedent of the work of this board, because we can advocate for appropriations, but I would love to hear from you all where you might write the LAOB into some of the work that you're doing around affordability and accessibility.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
for
Yeah,
coming
great of you
in.
guys all to come in. Yes.
Senator,
yeah,
I'm
but-
sending you all an explainer about the land access opportunity
Okay.
board right now.
Okay.
So if you have any questions, let us know.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Yeah, bye-bye. Have a good day.
Come on in.
Sorry, we're running late. Afraid you blocked us out.
Been a busy morning here. So, good morning to you folks, and so we have with us Vermont Citizens for the Lake Champlain future.
It's Citizens Advisory Committee on Lake Champlain's future. We've been around since 1980.
Yeah, and I know we
Come here annually.
visited with
Yeah, thank you very
Lori,
much.
many times in past years, and
Yeah.
and Hillary, and so it's good to have you folks with us. I don't know, Lori, was you gonna start off, or are we gonna go right?
I think I'll start off
You'll start.
and then we'll, if we can, I forgot, how much time do we have today?
Half hour.
A half hour, so we'll try to be quick and allow for some of the remote folks, some of our members to speak to a couple of our priorities.
Yeah, and we'll introduce ourselves quickly, so.
Yep.
we won't-
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Irene Renner for Chittenden North and Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County.
Rich Westman, I'm from William County.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Orleans County. So, welcome, and you can introduce yourself.
I will, thank you.
And we'll kick right out.
Senators, Chairman Starr, thanks again for your time today. Good to see you again. As you know, the Citizens Advisory Committee on Lake Champlain's future is a governor-appointed committee established in 1989 to provide input and ultimately to present this action plan to the legislature on issues confronting Lake Champlain. Not just water quality, but obviously our focuses have been water quality issues. I'm Mark Nod. I'm the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee. I've been on the committee for a number of years, and again, thanks again for the opportunity to visit again with you. Joining me today in person are Bob Fisher, who you've heard from also. Bob is the wastewater leadership in South Burlington, City of South Burlington. Katie Dar is our staff person with the Lake Champlain Basin Program. And then we have Lori Fisher, you know well from Lake Champlain Committee, Hillary Solomon from Holy Medowee Natural Resource Conservation District. And then we also have Wayne Elliott, a engineer from Essex.
Yeah.
I won't spend a lot of time about who we are or what our process is. We've been in front of you before. You're all veterans and know and have heard from us before. So annually, we deliver our action plan and include priorities that we glean from our 8 to 10 meetings, public meetings, and get input from citizens, input from scientists, from experts in their various fields on issues relating to Lake Champlain. This year, some of them might look familiar to you. There's still challenges. Some of them are new, but our top priorities this year, again, are focused on aquatic invasive species, education and management. It is probably the single greatest threat to Lake Champlain, is what we've been told. Enhanced public access. The COVID pandemic taught us that how important good public access is and equitable public access is for public health, and how big the demand is for that in the state of Vermont and our tourism economy. Continued investment in infrastructure and practices that are impact community resilience to climate change. We continue to experience what I call climate confusion. It's just unpredictable and extreme. It's been a common thread since Tropical Storm Irene, but it becoming increasingly challenging as we try to get the most bang for the buck. Continuing to support agricultural transition to sustainability. We recognize the challenges facing dairy, organic dairy, conventional dairy, it doesn't matter. It's a really challenging business to work in. As you know, again, we have concerns with the dysfunction happening with water quality regulatory enforcement that's within the Agency of Ag or shared with DEC. It hasn't worked, continues not to work, and something needs to get done about it. And I think you've heard from us on that issue specifically for at least a decade.
Have you guys ever had Ryan Patch visit?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was in here twice, I think, because we didn't get all the way through it.
Right.
But it sounded like they had come quite a ways on improving, their practices and cover cropping and a host of issues. But I just wondered if he met with you folks to give you updates on.
We haven't heard, but we'll be meeting with Secretary Moore and with Anson Tevitz on how they're having their staff sort out what the regulatory enforcement revision looks like. I know there's a de-delegation petition submitted to the EPA looking to take that away, really forcing the issue to just, someone's got to take control and manage that enforcement more effectively than what's happening, and not lead to more lawsuits. The final priority is, the increased assessment and mitigation of contaminant pollution. We know PFAS is everywhere. We read about it constantly. It is literally in us everywhere. But we also are aware that we've lost sense of our precautionary principle, and we're ending up having to have significant public health concerns and cleanup by the use of chemicals that perhaps shouldn't have been used in the manner that they were. And it's just becoming increasingly apparent that prevention is the key, and there are alternatives. So joining today is Lori Fisher. I'm going to let her start and speak to aquatic invasive species.
Yeah. Morning, Lori.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry not to be joining you in person. Can you all hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Well, Chairman Starr and Vice Chair Coleman and Collimore, I'm sorry, and members of the committee, happy to be here. Want to share some thoughts that we have as an advisory committee on aquatic invasive species. It's a high priority and one we've raised in the past. They are a significant threat to ecological and recreational health, and aquatic invasive species are basically plants, animals, pathogens that are non-native to the watershed and that have been proven to cause either economic, environmental, or human health harm. They can do things like divert the food resources from native species, reduce light penetration, change habitats, impair water quality, interfere with recreational opportunities, and reduce property values. So there's a significant economic impact to this, whether it's our infrastructure or our tourism-based economy. And also there's a threat, a health threat to both native fish and sport fish. So we know on Lake Champlain that we have 51 non-native species. The last one came in 2018, the spiny water flea. And all of the invasive species on Lake Champlain are a threat to other waterways in the state, the 800 lakes, roughly lakes and ponds that we have in the state. And Lake Champlain is further threatened by the waterways we're connected to. So the Hudson River has about twice as many invasives as Lake Champlain does. The Great Lakes, nearly 4 times as many. And human transport is a big conduit. Of the species whose origin we know about on Lake Champlain, the vast majority of them came through that southern canal system, and that's a vector, as are all our access sites on water bodies. And of course, we want to encourage access to our waterways. That's how we foster stewardship. That's one of the reasons that we all live and work in this wonderful place is the incredible access and or need or the wonderful outdoor opportunities that we have here and our outdoor environment. But we're not investing enough in the prevention aspect to keep invasive species out or control the ones that we have here. So we don't have enough funding. There's very little funding from the general fund. I think it amounts to about $25,000 a year from general fund monies that actually go to aquatic invasive species prevention. We have lost a short-term bump of about $100,000 to allocate towards aquatic invasive species. So we just, while invasives are increasing and their threat is increasing and recreational interest is increasing, we are reducing our funding in order to combat this problem. We have one staff person really in ANR who is dedicated to managing programs. You know, if you go on the DEC website, you will constantly see just this poor one staff person in charge as the contact for greeter programs, as the contact for grants programs, and all sorts of aspects of the aquatic invasive species management program. And you know, several years ago, we had 3 full-time equivalents. Now we're down to 1 while these species are increasing, and we are not investing in what we need to do for prevention. So some of the things that we have recommended as a CAC is that we need to consider new funding sources, dedicated funding sources for species prevention and management, such as a mandatory boat decal program for motorized and non-motorized craft, also mandatory watercraft inspection and certification programs, and high-profile boat inspection stations with high-pressure hot water wash systems, as well as consider a live bait ban similar to what's in place in Quebec to avoid inadvertent transport. We have breeder programs throughout the state. They're not fully funded. We're seeing diminished funds being allocated through the grant and aid system that helps municipalities combat local and regional issues and promote prevention activities, but all of these are underfunded right now. And so we see the state really needing to make an investment in being far more proactive and preventative in dealing with aquatic invasive species. And in the interest of time, I'll end there. Happy to take questions after other people go or whenever you feel is appropriate.
Well, thank you, Lori. Are there any questions right now?
No, thank you.
No, so we'll keep rolling through so everyone that wants to speak can.
Wayne, why don't we move to you? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, did you want to hit the ag piece first, Mark? Depending on
No,
how much.
we'll wrap up with ag if you.
Okay, all right.
Infrastructure.
Okay, so I'll discuss briefly the investment in natural developed infrastructure. Guess timely today here with the relative to climate change, where we were -15 a week or so ago, and today it's 50 degrees and sunny here in the middle of February. So obviously climate change, the concern there is we're getting more frequent severe precipitation and flooding. We're seeing that this winter as we have in prior years. That results in increased risk to public safety, infrastructure damages, property loss, and pollutant loading. There's kind of two parts of this with the investment. We've got the natural, and then we've got the developed infrastructure. So we want to make sure that we're protecting, restoring, our natural features, our river corridors, floodplains, wetlands, especially repairing also the vegetated riparian areas, because they are very important and cost effective in hitting these resilient strategies, and have obviously the benefits of providing clean water and ecological health. So we see that as a significant area of focus, attention, and continued investment on the natural infrastructure side. One other piece that we kind of tucked in here for this year, which is a little bit different, a little concern about water quality, public impacts from on-site wastewater systems. About 50% of the state is on-site wastewater systems. If properly designed, constructed, very sufficient and adequate, not necessary to always be connected to a municipal sewer system. And we started here with kind of a soft request here, as we really want to be the state to kind of take the lead and be more proactive with education outreach to homeowners. The concern there with some of the contaminants, pollution with PFAS and other things is the pumping and maintaining of septic tanks is becoming more costly and restrictive, especially where we've got some of these disadvantaged communities. So that's probably an area that may not get the attention it needs moving forward, with those costs significantly increasing. So we think a way to start here versus making it more of a regulatory issue is just improving the education oversight to people who have on-site systems, so at least the basic maintenance is being done. And then separately, we want to continue to support these investments in kind of built infrastructure that's adaptive, resilient, obviously focused on the compact settlement, the dense Vermont communities, where those can be vulnerable to climate impacted events. So where we're building new infrastructure in these villages, a lot more focus obviously on affordability, housing, with drinking water, sewer, stormwater infrastructures. We want to make sure that that's designed appropriately for the future climate change impacts. And that's always part of our consideration moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Any questions for Wayne right now?
No, thank you.
Bob, you want to follow up with?
Yeah, sure. Contaminants. We all know about PFAS everywhere. There's many other issues. Chlorides continue to impact our streams. Obviously in agriculture, pesticides, runoff. And really all of them, it's really an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Certainly from the wastewater, I operate 2 wastewater facilities. we don't add PFAS into it. It all comes to us and it has to go somewhere. It's like our biosolids we produce is really only 3 ways: incineration, which doesn't happen in Vermont. So you either got to landfill it, then you have leachate and off-gassing issues, and or you land apply, then you can have issues with, some residual chemicals. My facilities produce Class A for beneficial reuse, and that is. But also, like I said, it's actually 55% of Vermonters are on septic tanks, the most in the nation by far in population. It continues to go up. Yeah, we're the winners.
I'll be darned, we're number one. again.
Number one and number two and number one. And it continues to tick up as more people build up into the countryside. Obviously, in the core service areas, you build into there, you can mitigate for these things. I can put filtration on and whatnot. But there's vast land application of this going on from all the septic tanks across the entire state, microplastics, PFAS, you can't mitigate from that. Blood levels for PFAS and PFOA have dropped about 90% since they first outlawed them, but there's more the chemical change, it's everywhere. And it's the same as the phosphorus, there's legacy chemicals. So really it's trying to, ounce of prevention, trying to, regulate against these things. They're ubiquitous, and trying to mitigate coming into our.
We've had several people in to talk about that, like Teflon, things that we have all been sold to be good things.
Every computer,
It's
every
on-
wire.
It's on
Clothes.
toilet paper,
Clothes.
Carpeting and stained
Yeah.
proof,
It's-
carpeting and seats in your car, and
it's on
it's everywhere.
the receipts. You see the clerks kind of lick their fingers on the receipts. I'm sure my levels are very high, but from a municipal standpoint, the average person, an 188-pound male produces about 365 pounds of poop a year, about 1 pound. I'm significantly above that, but it's got to go somewhere. And really, some of mine it's mostly all used for since V-Trans has allowed it now. It's for soil amendment. Went to Swanton Airport to the park and ride. And actually, you have the authority. You have the authority already through Act pulled up from last year to regulate all soil amendments. And for that, you could actually you would actually have the ability to ban it right off the bat if you wanted with Act 41 on farmlands. That was an issue, but you've actually already got that authority.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, then if I have to haul, it's got to go. My greenhouse gases are going to more than double immediately if I'm very lucky and go to Coventry. Probably have to go to Sherbrooke. If Canadians will take it. The costs will continue. My costs will triple. So there's no easy solutions for any of these things other than try to prevention.
Yeah. Questions for Bob also?
So why don't we have Hillary speak to public access, and she can also touch base on her work supporting farmers and a lot of the issues we've heard, Eric Clifford and others, related to just not enough support as small and medium farms are stepping up to implement required agricultural practices, and the agencies and the state facilitating access to funding sources, technical support, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'll address the perennial ag MOU.
Yeah. Good morning, Hillary. We had one of your neighbors in, I think earlier, Brian Leach from down the Meadowy Valley in earlier, testifying on the farm, well, in regards to the farm and possibly putting up a slaughter facility for neighbors and himself.
That's great. Yeah, so Hillary Solomon, live in Middletown Springs and work in the South Lake Champlain watershed. And that's great that Brian Leach was able to come in and testify. He's doing really innovative things, and he's very community minded and includes neighboring farms in his ideas and projects. So it's great to hear.
Yeah.
I think first I'll just talk quick. I know we're running out of time. I don't know if how much time do I have?
About what I put you down for, maybe 30 seconds. No, we're running a little late. We started a little late, so continue on.
Okay, so I'll try and be quick though. The first thing I wanted to talk about was access to Lake Champlain, especially down in the southern part of Lake Champlain. There are very few places where residents or tourists can get actual access to the lake itself. And then increasing access for non-motorized via boating on ponds and streams in the watershed is also an area that could use improvement. And we saw the, influx of folks from out of state during COVID who were interested in recreating in Vermont. We're now the third highest gross domestic product in the US for recreational tourism dollars, which I actually just found out that yesterday, so behind Montana and Hawaii. So a pretty big source of income, up to $1.5 billion apparently in tourism dollars in 2021. So really significant part of our economy. I raise kids down here in the Southern Lake Champlain watershed, and we do not have great access to the lake. There's a dirt road in Whitehall, there's a marina in Whitehall, there's a marina in Benson that only allows people with boats who are members to use that area. So very, very limited access to the southern end of Lake Champlain for recreation. So it would be really nice to see some type of a committee or some type of work to help promote figuring out where those access points could be, developing them. We could at the same time have it be a workforce development exercise, use VYCC or local small businesses to help install those access areas once we had locations where they might be appropriate. And then the other piece is that, sorry.
Is that because that the land is all owned by private people up through there, or is there some state-owned land where it could be accessed, build access to the lake?
Yeah, I think it's because it's privately owned, but there are partners like the Nature Conservancy that own land that has access to the lake. So I think there are places where we could start having those conversations and see if we could work, if there would be a way to partner with those groups. It would be amazing to have a state park in the southern part of Lake Champlain. But though I don't know what that would take. It would be nice to, maybe there could be a report about where would there be possibilities for public access. I think we're pretty early on in this process of trying to figure out where those locations might be. That's a great question. Thank you. And then the other piece is that it ties into all the, the work that we do trying to clean up Lake Champlain and the funds that are available right now. And so if our local residents don't have access to that resource, it's harder for them to both value that commitment to cleaning up Lake Champlain and also to understand how the, their property and their practices, how they directly relate to water quality in Lake Champlain. And then also just making sure that sort of historically marginalized or disenfranchised communities have access, also that when we're trying to figure out where to put these access points, that we keep in mind that we want all people to have access to the lake if we can. And that was my sort of prepared part about access. I've spoken to this committee about agriculture in the past and just being very supportive of the programming that is currently available to farms. And I think Mark was going to speak about enforcement. And as you all know, conservation districts are not regulatory, but we do provide technical assistance to farms who are in the enforcement process. And so we have seen that it's a pretty slow and inefficient process. And the process itself doesn't really help the farm figure out how to figure out the solution to the problem. So I think that there are definitely ways that that process could be improved that would actually help the farmers navigate it more easily and sort of come out on the other side with an improved, farm situation, not just a penalty, but no solution. And I'll pass it to Mark then.
Brian.
Yeah, if I could, Hillary, and I realize your focus with this group is just on Lake Champlain. You are, I'm sure, no doubt, well aware of the controversy, if you will, surrounding using chemicals for the aquatic invasive species in places like Lake Bombazine. And I don't want to put you on the spot. So if you want to take a fourth down and punt, that's fine. I'm wondering what your view of that is. There's a bill in the House that calls for a moratorium on any more permitting of using chemicals in our lakes. And I don't know whether that's, quite frankly, I don't know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. So I'm asking for help.
Yeah. It's challenging because I think.
Damned if you don't.
Yeah, I think I sense a punt coming, I think, which is fine.
Well, right. I mean, I think that one's challenging a little bit because it comes out of sort of a local disagreement with one of our within one of our lake associations, and it's grown now. I would just be giving my personal opinion, and I'm happy to do that maybe over a cup of coffee or something. I do think in general chemicals are dangerous, and we should be very cautious in how we use them. So I also think that, we need to take into account, I guess that would be in my wearing this hat, I would say that we should be cautious how we use chemicals.
You could be a politician. Very good answer. Mark, I think it's your turn.
Thanks, Hillary. So, as Hillary noted, there's some really great programs supporting farmers in their management of their on-farm practices. They're increasing as small and medium farms are required to meet the required agricultural practices. The dysfunctionality that's occurred for a decade or more with enforcement related to that, Hillary described some of the challenges with it. We know there's a dedelegation petition pending, push by CLF and others to really force the issue for the two agencies to figure out how to do better for the environment and better for the farmers. It just hasn't worked. And so we have historically said, give it back to DEC, let ag provide the technical support and really help with implementation. That's their skill set. This year, we just said, please press to get the agencies to figure out how to manage their enforcement process so there's positive outcomes for farmers and for the environment. Again, it's a big part of or a common thread through much of what we're prioritizing has connections to education, whether it's public access. It's a way of educating our constituents who learned through COVID that getting outside was really healthy for their brains and bodies. Having that access for everyone in disenfranchised communities, et cetera, is even more important, we've learned, because there's inequitable access throughout this state. There's challenges with access. If you don't have a boat, some of the fish and wildlife access points you're not allowed if you don't have a motorboat. So improving those access points are key for citizens to then have knowledge, awareness, experience to then appreciate and support the continued investment in our our natural resources, the recreational economy that it supports, which is enormous, and understand better where they flush, how they flush, what happens to it, and where their food comes from, right? And the challenges that, just getting a gallon of milk from wherever, and if it's trucked in from Wisconsin, you're not helping your neighbor up in Franklin County. So a common thread has a lot of education components to it. I think I could stop there and have any questions that folks might have.
No, we'll check into that enforcement, but personally, I dealt with both of the agencies, and I wouldn't let a DEC on my property, but didn't have. Ag, they're, it's a different atmosphere. And then you take like Hillary's crew.
Right.
And ag, there's a major difference there. Farmers would a lot rather have the conservation districts go and help them because they're polite, pleasant, and explain things out, where when ag goes, they hear a different tone of voice, different language. And then when DEC, if they go, it's a total way bill.
Well,
And so, I was always taught you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. And you usually get farmers into compliance the same way. You can get them into compliance with honey a lot easier than you can with vinegar. And that's just my personal experience and personal knowledge, but we'll certainly take this up with ag and ask them, what's going on and why we're hearing some complaints.
Yeah, I think the consistency is the big issue between the various federal or state agencies, that there's a consistent support, and if enforcement is necessary, it's based on those consistent definitions and practices. And it's been anything but, as you know. I know in my practice, there's inconsistency with shoreland district and stormwater, right? And sometimes it's definitional, sometimes it's staff and their personal perspectives on how they're supposed to implement regulations. Bottom line is it hasn't worked well, and we could do better, especially now when farmers have all the economic and environmental challenges with climate change and et cetera.
Well, the biggest problem is they have never, in the last 20 years, haven't been paid a fair price for the work they do or for the product they produce. And I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you didn't have enough money to go around at the end of the week, but it's certainly not a very good situation. And sometimes to survive, you have to cut corners when you're in that type of a position. And it's not just this year or last year or the year before, it's constant. And we worked hard to try to get the price up so they could afford to take care of things better. And it's been an uphill battle because the same people that buy the milk are the same people that are processing the milk into products. And when you get to making products that you've got to compete with on the open market, you want to buy your raw product as cheap as you can. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that whole deal out. And so, we're
big economic challenges. I've looked at it as Vermont's dairy industry is irrelevant to the global dairy, but we have to operate within the Farm Bill. Sometimes it benefits us, sometimes we're the flea on the tail of the dog. And so programs that expand diversification, create additional opportunities, like Brian coming in and talking about those issues. I've always thought about farming in Vermont is really about you grow grass really well. Everything else that you get from eating the grass or anything else is sort of the bonus. But if you can grow grass well, there's no pollution, we're limited pollution, and with carbon sequestration, payment for ecosystem services, you're holding water back, soil profiles are generating, it's win, 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 win. So if we can create an agricultural system that diversifies a little bit more away from the dominant dairy. I mentioned it in House Ag earlier that if I had all of my 401k or managed a trust for someone else and had 80% of my investment in one thing, well, our investment in agriculture is obviously dominantly dairy, and diversification is better in the long run from that economic perspective. So again,
Well,
thanks again.
yes,
We very much
thank
appreciate
you
your
very
time.
much for,
Thank you.
coming in, and we'll
We're always available.
ask questions. Never been shy.
I think Hillary wants to say something.
Yeah, hi, Hillary.
I realized I said something that was incorrect and I don't want to have an incorrect testimony. So it's not that
I
our
thought I heard-
recreational-
I thought I heard you saying something incorrect. No.
So
Go
it's
ahead.
our the percent of our GDP that comes from the recreational income. That's the third highest, not of course, our GDP can't compete with other states like California, but the percent contribution from recreation, that's
Okay.
good.
And I'm sorry I put you on the spot.
No
Thank you.
worries. I feel like I should have a good answer to that question, but I really don't. It's very complicated.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
we've got Ryan on the screen,
Thanks
our
again.
next witness, so well, thanks for coming in, folks, and good luck with you next year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Before then.
Thank you.
See you, Lori. See you, Wayne.
Hello,
Morning, Ryan.
morning.
I invited you in because we all know what's happened with our organic dairy guys here in the last year or so. And the issue we're going to be working on a solution to try to help them out financially. But the issue that we wanted to chat with you in regards to Senator Welch's position, and I think we may have chatted a little bit about that before, was the $100 million that's in, I believe it's in the Farm Bill maybe, or over in the USDA. The language on where and what that money is supposed to be used for.
Sure.
Do you have that?
I have all of what USDA has announced publicly, which, to be perfectly honest with you, isn't particularly detailed, but I can tell you what I know right now. And so when Undersecretary Moffett was in Vermont with Peter, they were talking about this program that they were unveiling. It's the Organic Dairy Market Assistance Program, and it will be administered through USDA's Farm Service Agency, so FSA. It's $100 million, as you mentioned, and it is intended to help smaller organic farms with the cost pressures that we've seen throughout the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. So that's sort of like broad overview. And it is it's funded through Commodity Credit Corporation funds that were remaining from previous pandemic programs. So it's not in the Farm Bill. It's sort of authorized through the Commodity Credit Corporation coronavirus relief funding. And what we know from USDA is that it's supposed to help eligible organic dairy producers with up to 75% of their future or projected marketing costs in 2023. That's sort of 75%
of their
Yeah.
feed costs.
Marketing.
of their projected marketing costs, and it will be capped at the first 5 million pounds, like the DMC is. So it's the first 5 million that will receive payments, and hundredweight. And so that is the depth of detail that we have available to us right now. My sense is the mechanism for getting the funding out, which is through this marketing assistance, marketing cost, is just a way to help streamline the process and make it a bit quicker through an existing program. What that means in terms of like how it will translate on the ground to an organic dairy farmer is really unclear and hard to predict at this point. So we're consistently in communication with USDA, both communicating, I think, some of the urgency here, but also just asking for more details. And we haven't heard too much beyond what we heard when they announced the program. So they had a statutory deadline to get a program out the door to do exactly this. And they met that with their announcement, but that's about as much as we know so far.
So I don't know if I missed it or not. Is there a timetable on this?
Not to my knowledge. They didn't announce certainly the day they would launch the program. They're sort of flying the plane or building the plane as they fly it, is my sense, Senator. So we are consistently in contact with them, sort of asking for that level of information. And it's certainly something, we will communicate with you all once we do know. We know there's lots of interested parties, and the second we have more information, I'm sure that information will get around. I see Maddie over there, the folks like Maddie and the committee quite quickly.
It doesn't sound like this is going to be very helpful in terms of the immediate situation. So.
Well, but is that money that's going to be in this fiscal year, federal fiscal year, that's going to be handed out, Ryan, or do you know that yet?
I don't know that we know that yet. I will have to check on the authorization, but yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speculate.
Well, because what we have in front of us is a request, for 9.2 million or like $5 a hundredweight for our organic guys for 22. But we have no plan to how to do that. Who would do that? And we, don't know what you guys are doing in DC to alleviate hopefully some of that cost with some of that federal money that you folks have. And so I guess the only request that we would have is if you get information or enough so you feel comfortable letting us know what you've got facing you or result to that. To us, that would be most helpful.
Yeah, I certainly can. And I think when we testified previously, we also testified in House Agriculture, and someone asked me they asked me if they thought it'd be out the door in 90 days from whatever day that was. And I think what is true, it is still true today that I don't believe it will be out the door in 90 days. And I don't want to, I'm not here I can't really pass judgment on the proposal that you all are considering, but I understand how important some of the timing is and trying to match those things up. And if we have more information on the USDA program that can help you all make an informed decision, I will happily share that with you.
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciate that if you if you find out anything to let us know and we'll, because in the next, week or two, we're gonna have to go to work on trying to, finish up a plan how we're gonna deal with stuff.
Yeah.
So, Irene, do you have
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Ryan, I'm hearing you mention marketing. I didn't get that from the dairy farmers that we spoke to. It sounded like they needed it for paying loans off, for keeping their finances afloat. Is there some intersection with marketing that I'm not understanding, or does marketing translate to something different at the federal level than it does here where I live?
My assessment, is that that language is just a mechanism to get the payments out the door. It's a way that they sort of can easily sort of keep track of the amount of milk being produced and marketed through organic processors. And so they'll be using that mechanism, and I think the majority of their organic dairy farmers are paying some sort of marketing cost through a processor. So it's sort of an easy way for them to use the funding versus standing up some other program or mechanism to get the money out the door. I don't know that it is. The marketing costs aren't what they're trying to address. I believe it's just the means by which they'll get the money out the door for this program. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Also, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem, anytime.
Yeah,
We'll be in
thanks
touch.
for hanging around. We were running a little late today.
I have nothing better to do, Senator, so.
So, with that, I
Yeah.
guess we'll adjourn the meeting and we'll,
Thank you.